Our focus to West Africa, where Russia continues to deepen its ties and expand its influence in the region. Moscow has finally authorized a nuclear deal with two of its most notable West African friends, Mali and Burkina Faso. The ECOWAS breakaway states of Burkina Faso and Mali.
Burkina Faso just signed a nuclear deal with Russia, a quiet move that could shake the whole of West Africa. But why would a country battling blackouts bet everything on nuclear power? And why now with Russia? Let's find out. For years, Burkina Faso has been trapped in a relentless cycle. Generate a little power, lose even more to population growth, scramble for aid, repeat. Despite being rich in sun, gold, and resolve, the country remains one of the most energy-deprived nations on Earth. Over 60% of its population lives without access to electricity, and those who do often suffer through rolling blackouts, flickering bulbs, and an economy unable to function beyond daylight hours. But this isn't just an energy crisis. It's a development crisis, a healthcare crisis, an education crisis, and most importantly, a sovereignty crisis. Without reliable power, no nation can build. Factories stall, hospitals shut down early, and schools struggle to function without digital tools. And Burkina Faso knows it. The country isn't simply looking for electricity, it's looking for control. Control over its infrastructure, its economy, and its future. But let's be clear, Burkina Faso didn't suddenly wake up and decide nuclear power was trendy. This wasn't a flashy choice, it was a desperate but calculated decision. Solar power had promise, but panels can only do so much when storage tech is expensive and the grid is weak. Hydropower is fragile in the face of climate change. And fossil fuels? Too costly to import, too unstable to rely on. Every route was explored. Every solution ran into a wall. That wall is what led them to consider the unthinkable: splitting atoms. For a country like Burkina Faso, nuclear power used to be a foreign luxury, something reserved for the global elite: Russia, the US, China, France. But over the last 2 decades, the nuclear playbook has changed. Modular reactors, simplified designs, and international partnerships have opened the door to nations once considered too unstable, too poor, or too inexperienced to even think about atomic energy. And now, that door is wide open in Ouagadougou. But even with technology more accessible, nuclear remains a high-stakes game. You don't just flip a switch and light up cities. You need fuel security, waste management, radiation protection, emergency planning, and, most of all, public trust. That's why this isn't just a decision for Burkina Faso's Ministry of Energy, it's a national transformation. One that touches every part of society, from universities and training centers to rural radio stations tasked with explaining nuclear safety to villagers. The bet is bold. Nuclear power isn't cheap or fast. It takes time, expertise, and enormous upfront investment. But Burkina Faso is playing the long game. It knows that once the infrastructure is in place, nuclear energy can provide stable, uninterrupted power for decades. No sunlight required, no rivers needed, just raw, baseload electricity that can keep hospitals running at night, factories operating around the clock, and water treatment plants purifying life itself. And let's not ignore the symbolism. For a nation often portrayed as fragile, volatile, and dependent on others, this deal screams the opposite. It's a declaration. We will no longer wait for handouts. We will build our future, even if it means splitting atoms to do it. But nuclear isn't just about power. It's also about prestige. In a region dominated by narratives of instability, Burkina Faso is now the first in its immediate neighborhood to take this leap. It's no longer content with being seen as a passive observer in Africa's development story. With this move, it's positioning itself as a technological leader, a pioneer among former colonies, breaking new ground. Of course, with every bet comes risk. Questions loom about safety, political stability, and whether the infrastructure needed to support such a system can truly be built. But perhaps the bigger risk is doing nothing, staying trapped in the energy poverty that has defined Burkina Faso's post-independence struggle. And so, the country has made its choice. It will not remain in the shadows of global development. It has chosen a dangerous path, but one lined with immense potential. And to walk that path, it needed a partner not just willing to help, but willing to bet with them. That brings us to the next chapter. Why Russia? Why would a nuclear superpower be interested in helping a small, struggling African nation leap into the atomic age? Burkina Faso's decision to go nuclear was bold, but what's equally telling is who said yes. Russia didn't just agree to build reactors, it offered fuel supply, waste handling, personnel training, legal framework design, and even public education programs. That's not a business contract, it's a strategic partnership. And in today's geopolitical chessboard, Russia doesn't play unless there's more than just money at stake. So why would a global nuclear powerhouse like Russia invest so deeply in a country with no nuclear background, no prior infrastructure, and limited financial firepower? For Moscow, this isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about Africa and the vacuum the West left behind. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. After decades of dominance by France, the European Union, and US soft power projects, a new era is taking shape in West Africa. A wave of post-colonial realignment is sweeping through the region, and Burkina Faso is one of its frontrunners. In less than 3 years, the country expelled French troops, pulled out of the G5 Sahel alliance, and deepened security cooperation with Russia, all while expressing a clear appetite for self-reliance over Western dependency. Russia saw the opportunity early. It wasn't just military assistance the Burkinabe were after. It was technological leverage, economic development, and the kind of national dignity that only full-scale infrastructure programs can deliver. So, while Western governments remained tangled in red tape, lectures, and conditional aid, Moscow offered something different. Tools, not terms. The nuclear deal wasn't born overnight. Over 2023 and 2024, Russia laid the groundwork carefully. It sent advisors. It welcomed delegations. It conducted feasibility studies, structured training modules, and created the narrative that nuclear power was not only possible, but essential. By the time the ink dried in St. Petersburg in 2025, the handshake was just a formality. Russia had already embedded itself into the vision. But make no mistake, Russia's motivations are far from charitable. This deal grants Moscow something far more valuable than money: influence at the core of a rapidly transforming region. West Africa, once considered France's exclusive backyard, is becoming a battleground of soft power, and Russia is claiming territory not with tanks, but with turbines and uranium. Nuclear energy is especially potent in this context. It's not like selling grain or trucks, it's high trust, high risk, and deeply technical. Once you're inside a country's nuclear infrastructure, you're part of their security architecture, their academic landscape, and their policy future. Russia knows that, and it's playing the long game. By embedding Rosatom into Burkina Faso's scientific, legal, and energy systems, it's tying the country's future directly to Russian expertise and supply chains. There's also a broader narrative at play, one Russia has been quietly building for years. We are the partner the Global South deserves. From Egypt to Zimbabwe, Moscow has offered nuclear cooperation as a path to autonomy, free from IMF conditions, Western geopolitics, or green hypocrisy. Burkina Faso is the latest addition to this growing club, and its decision reinforces the message: nations no longer need to look west to develop. And then there's the symbolism. Burkina Faso's shift toward nuclear power under Russian guidance sends a strong message to its neighbors, especially Mali and Niger, who are also drifting away from the French sphere and showing interest in similar deals. Moscow is positioning itself not just as a partner, but as a model for technological independence, one that appeals to governments tired of being treated like clients rather than equals. But the stakes are more than symbolic. With uranium deposits in Niger, political realignments across the Sahel, and a growing chorus of African leaders calling for resource sovereignty, Russia is placing its bet where others hesitate. It's using nuclear diplomacy to construct a network of loyal, empowered allies, not just for energy collaboration, but for defense, trade, and political backing in global institutions like the UN. So when Russia said yes to Burkina Faso, it wasn't an act of kindness. It was an act of calculation. The Kremlin sees what others have ignored: The future of global influence runs through Africa, and it won't be won by speeches. It'll be won by cables, reactors, and megawatts. But what exactly does this deal include? How deep is the cooperation? How far is Russia willing to go? Forget the vague press release language about cooperation. The signed document is a sprawling, multi-layered construction schedule that reads more like a national transformation plan than an energy contract. It unfolds in 4 deliberate phases, each deeper and more entwined with Burkina Faso's institutions than the last. Phase 1. The moment the ink dried in St. Petersburg, teams from Rosatom's International Business Directorate flew to Ouagadougou to launch a milestone zero audit, an exhaustive review of Burkina Faso's legal codes, insurance statutes, emergency response capacity, and even zoning maps. Within 18 months, the parties must deliver a standalone Nuclear Safety Act written line by line with IAEA lawyers, a financing framework that splits costs 70-30 between a low-interest Russian export credit line and a new Burkinabe sovereign green bond, and a bespoke security doctrine integrating local gendarmes, Russian advisors, and satellite-based perimeter sensors. No concrete is poured until every clause is ratified, but once Parliament passes the Safety Act, the next phase begins automatically. No additional political vote required. Russia ensured the runway is clear. Phase 2. Rather than jump straight to a gigawatt-scale plant, Rosatom will erect a 50-megawatt research reactor on a plateau 40 kilometers outside Ouagadougou. It's the newest version of their modular RMB-50, shipped in prefabricated sections and assembled like oversized Lego under a fabric dome to shield construction from Sahel dust storms. This reactor is not about lighting up the grid, it's about forging capacity. Medical-grade isotopes for cancer therapy at Yelgado Hospital, neutron activation labs to certify gold purity for the mining sector, and an on-site training simulator where Burkinabe engineers can fly a reactor's control room before a single uranium pellet is loaded. Rosatom shoulders 100% of the enriched uranium supply for the first 10 years, returning spent fuel to its Siberian reprocessing plant, a clause designed to calm international watchdogs worried about proliferation. Phase 3. If the research unit operates safely for 24 consecutive months, an automatic trigger clause kicks in. Construction of a twin-unit, 440-megawatt pressurized water plant, the VVER 440 Arctic Sahel variant, tweaked for searing heat, erratic rainfall, and a notoriously dusty Harmattan season. Rosatom commits to building a 330 kilovolt transmission backbone that stitches the coastal trade city of Bobo Dioulasso, the tomato processing hub in Cumbia, and the manganese mines in Tambao into a single synchronous loop, fabricating 30% of non-nuclear components locally, think concrete segments, rebar, switchgear casings, jump-starting a homegrown heavy industry cluster, and training 500 Burkinabe technicians through a new nuclear engineering faculty at Joseph Kaiserbo University, funded by Moscow but staffed by African professors from Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa, to avoid accusations of neo-colonial brainwashing. Phase 4. After grid connection, the partnership shifts from construction to stewardship. A joint venture called Sonuki BF holds the plant license. 51% Burkinabe State, 49% Rosatom. Profit allocation is frozen for 25 years, guaranteeing Burkina Faso a majority revenue stream while letting Russia recoup its capital. Meanwhile, an in-country fuel fabrication annex is penciled for 2035, contingent on geologists confirming commercially viable uranium deposits near Marcoy. If proven, Burkina Faso could one day supply its reactors and sell surplus to Mali or Niger under Russian fuel bank oversight. Every phase threads new obligations into the national fabric. School curricula add atomic physics modules. The civil service exam reserves slots for radiation health officers. Even the Agriculture Ministry wins a neutron irradiation unit to create drought-resistant sorghum strains. In essence, Rosatom is not merely wiring in a power plant, it is wiring itself into every ministry, classroom, and industrial park. Yet such an all-encompassing build-out raises another question. Even with the best blueprints, can a nation grappling with security threats, limited fiscal headroom, and public skepticism truly carry a nuclear program to the finish line? Financing gaps, insurgent sabotage and misinformation campaigns could derail the bravest timeline. And that leads us to the looming challenge no reactor design can solve on its own. Can Burkina Faso and Russia protect this atomic vision from the enemies it will inevitably attract? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. For every megawatt of electricity promised by Burkina Faso's nuclear leap, there's an equal and opposite force determined to pull the plug. Because this isn't just a technical project, it's a geopolitical tremor. And tremors unsettle those who once sat comfortably on the tectonic plates of African influence. Not everyone wants a nuclear-powered Burkina Faso. Some forces want it to collapse. The most immediate threat is domestic, but it doesn't come from public protests or anti-nuclear campaigners. It comes from insurgents. The northern and eastern regions of Burkina Faso remain active conflict zones, where insurgent factions aligned with Al-Qaeda and ISIS exploit porous borders, weak state presence, and community grievances. These groups thrive on chaos, and nothing represents order, ambition, and state building quite like a nuclear reactor complex. The symbolism alone makes it a target. Russian security advisors know this. They've already begun working with Burkina Faso's military to draft a security perimeter strategy that mirrors tactics used to defend Rosatom projects in volatile areas like the Arctic or Siberian rail lines. A ring of drones, satellite surveillance, biometric checkpoints, and sniper outposts is already being proposed around the reactor site. But the deeper question is, how do you protect ambition in a country that is still, in some areas, fighting for territorial control? Then come the international saboteurs, the ones who smile in summits but whisper in backrooms. France, once the unchallenged overlord of West African infrastructure, has watched its regional dominance erode year by year. Ouagadougou's turn toward Moscow isn't just offensive, it's humiliating. French companies like EDF and AREVA, once top contenders for African energy projects, have been locked out of the deal. And worse, the Burkina Faso government has made it clear they didn't even consider Paris. Now, French diplomats are quietly lobbying the International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA and Western donors to apply pressure. That pressure takes many forms, raising concerns about reactor safety, delaying project insurance underwriting, or citing instability as a reason to stall global support. This is slow-motion sabotage, but make no mistake, it's sabotage nonetheless. The United States? Publicly indifferent, privately anxious. Washington never had a strong influence in Burkina Faso, but it did have soft power, NGOs, development programs, and counterinsurgency cooperation. That's now slipping. More importantly, US policymakers worry that Russia is using nuclear deals to deepen its grip across Africa. And they're not wrong. The Burkina Faso project fits into a larger pattern. Russia offers infrastructure, gets loyalty, builds long-term influence, all without deploying a single soldier. Western think tanks are already publishing op-eds cloaked in concern. Is Burkina Faso ready for nuclear energy? Could insurgency derail West Africa's atomic future? These are not neutral questions. They are rhetorical bombs designed to cast doubt, stir fear, and delay implementation. But it's not just the West that's uneasy. There are African power players watching with unease too. Nigeria, for instance, has long seen itself as the continent's default energy giant. But despite decades of oil wealth, it has yet to fully realize its nuclear ambitions. If Burkina Faso, a landlocked low-income country under security strain, manages to leapfrog ahead with Russian backing, it could embarrass Nigeria's elite, disrupt regional energy politics, and reset perceptions about who leads Africa's development. Even within Burkina Faso, there are factions quietly resisting the project, not out of ideology, but because of what it threatens. The fossil fuel import lobby, long entrenched in government procurement channels, stands to lose hundreds of millions as diesel contracts evaporate. Some opposition politicians, sensing political opportunity, have begun warning about atomic colonialism, accusing the junta of surrendering sovereignty to Russia in exchange for radioactive dependency. And yet, despite all these forces, armed, diplomatic, economic, and rhetorical, this project continues. Why? Because Burkina Faso's leadership sees nuclear power not just as a power source, but as a shield against energy poverty, a shield against dependence, a shield against being ignored. But ambition alone can't protect infrastructure. For this nuclear dream to survive, public trust must be built, the narrative must be controlled, and enemies, foreign and domestic, must be outmaneuvered. So how will Burkina Faso maintain momentum while holding off sabotage? How will it convince its people and the world that this isn't just another foreign-built project destined to rot? That's the real question Burkina Faso now faces. Not whether a plant can be built, but whether this entire nuclear venture can be owned by the people it's meant to uplift. Because the enemies are real, the risks are high, and the eyes of the world, both hostile and hopeful, are watching. For this project to survive, it cannot be treated as an import. It must become Burkinabe to its core. And that begins with the hardest part of any technological revolution: convincing the public to believe in something they can't yet see. Most citizens don't understand what a neutron is. They don't know what enriched uranium looks like. Many associate the word nuclear with bombs, Chernobyl, or disasters in places they've never heard of, but fear instinctively. In villages still lit by kerosene and candlelight, the promise of atomic energy sounds like science fiction, or worse, foreign trickery. For a government already navigating delicate political terrain, this is more than a communications challenge. It's a legitimacy test. That's why, quietly but systematically, a massive public awareness campaign is underway. Billboards are rising in Ouagadougou, showing smiling nurses using nuclear-powered diagnostic machines. Local radio stations now host weekly science segments in Mour and Dioula, explaining how radiation can improve crop resilience. A traveling atomic caravan has been dispatched, a rolling science fair that visits schools, markets, and mosques, letting ordinary people ask blunt questions. Will it explode? Will it poison our water? Will we still own our land? Instead of dodging, the government is answering with Burkinabe scientists, not Russian envoys. This isn't accidental. It's a strategy. The administration knows the only way to inoculate the project from foreign smear campaigns and local resistance is to turn the narrative into a national achievement. At the heart of this approach is human capital. It's one thing to build a reactor, it's another to staff it, regulate it, and explain it. That's why Burkina Faso isn't just importing Russian engineers, it's launching a generation of its own. Over 200 students have already been selected for nuclear science scholarships in Tomsk and St. Petersburg, while others are studying law, ethics, and radiation medicine. The goal is clear. Within 10 years, Burkina Faso wants every key position in its nuclear sector held by a Burkinabe. But even this isn't enough. To sustain a project of this magnitude, the ecosystem around it must be nourished. That's why plans are in motion to connect the nuclear industry to other sectors. Agriculture, using gamma irradiation to improve seed durability and reduce post-harvest losses. Healthcare, equipping hospitals with nuclear imaging tools, now possible with locally produced isotopes. Mining, authenticating the country's gold and manganese exports through advanced radiation-based assay techniques. Each of these initiatives serves a purpose beyond utility. They prove to the public, and to doubters abroad, that nuclear energy in Burkina Faso isn't some isolated mega-project built for elites. It's a national multiplier, stretching across regions, industries, and income levels. Still, infrastructure and awareness don't guarantee permanence. What ensures sustainability is institutional resilience. That's why the government, in collaboration with the African Commission on Nuclear Energy, AFCON, is creating a national nuclear authority, an independent watchdog designed to outlive political cycles, military transitions, or foreign pressures. Staffed by scientists, auditors, and legal scholars, its mandate is both regulatory and symbolic. To prove that Burkina Faso isn't just borrowing power, it's mastering it. This ultimately is the test. Because if Burkina Faso succeeds, it won't just light up its cities. It will light a path for others, Mali, Guinea, Togo, showing that nuclear power is not the preserve of wealthy nations, but the weapon of choice for those bold enough to wrestle back their destiny. It will show that a landlocked, resource-strained country, written off for decades, can split the atom not in war, but in peace, in hope, and defiance of every story told about what Africa is allowed to become. And that might be the most powerful energy of all. Do you think nuclear energy is the right solution for Africa's power crisis? Would you trust a nuclear plant built in your country? Let us know in the comments section. Is Russia becoming the new superpower in Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.